Last week, right here, in so many other communities, these waves crashed through the streets here, testing the aging infrastructure and taking lives. More lives were taken here than down in Louisiana.
Welcome back to Inside City Hall. That was President Biden earlier today after meeting with some Queens residents whose homes suffered major damage following last week's storm, which of course brought a historic amount of rain to our area. The flooding was responsible for the deaths of 13 people in the city, most of them living in basement apartments. Queens Borough President Donovan Richards was one of the many elected officials who was with President Biden during the visit. He joins us now to talk about that and more. Thanks for being here. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Errol.
First things first, your office is co-sponsoring a virtual town hall tomorrow on Hurricane Ida relief to connect families to critical services. Give us some details on what people can expect there.
Well, we're going to have several agencies, including the Comptroller, FEMA, OEM. And right now, just as we came through Sandy, and remember, Errol, I represented the Rockaways in the council, so I've had a little bit of experience on how to move through devastation like this. That the most important thing right now is to ensure that residents know what assistance is out there and to get those applications in right away so that they can see immediate relief.
What usually happens with flooding in Queens, and what was different or worse this time around?
Well, I'll start with the investment in Southeast Queens. You know, we were able to secure about $2 billion. Back in my time in the council, I was the chair of the Environmental Protection Committee, working along with Idanique Miller and also Adrian Adams. And, you know, we had significant investments in Southeast Queens. So what was different is there relatively was very little flooding in Southeast Queens going out into the Rockaway Peninsula. What was different this time is we saw parts of Queens hit, like Central Queens, Forest Hills, College Point, Whitestone, East Elmhurst, of course, and many other neighborhoods further north. So that was the difference. Flushing. I mean, this was the difference, I believe, in this storm.
As part of the East New York rezoning, and this was during your time in the council, the city created a pilot program to try and convert some basement apartments into units that are up to code. Last year, the city cut 90% of the funding to that program. Do you think the city knows or has taken the time to determine whether it is possible to make a sizable number of basement units safe and livable?
No, absolutely not. And Errol, going back to the council, I was also the chair of the zoning committee at that time when we rezoned East New York, and we worked with advocates and Councilmember Espinal at the time to get the basement pilot. And I believe there was so much red tape and bureaucracy that it never really got off the ground. You know, there's efforts and then there are efforts. And there was relatively very real effort put into ensuring that this program could be successful. So I think the answer, and this is something I talked to the mayor about today, the governor, as well as the president, there needs to be some subsidy put aside that would enable us to invest and bring these basements up into code.
Well, I mean, we've been talking about it for a decade now, and, you know, hundreds of units at least were at the first level of consideration for this pilot, and then the mayor cut all of the funding for it, you know, 90+% of the funding. Is there any information that can be sort of assembled? You know, I hate to think that we wasted 10 years on something that actually might have saved lives last week.
Well, let me just say, Errol, from personal experience, I've lived in basements. I come from very humble beginnings. My parents and I lived in basements. I know how important, what role they play in affordable housing, especially in a city where affordable housing is relatively scarce. They're very scarce. So if you go back to East New York, you'll see that out of only 9 applications were approved for that program, 8,000 applications disapproved. So you talk about effort, it was never really there. So of course we have to look at ways to codify, you know, and look at legislation on this issue. But the bottom line is we don't have to wait. We know that if you give homeowners the resources they need, that it will enable them to bring these basements up into compliance.
Parts of your old council district and Southeast Queens, as you mentioned, they've been dealing with flooding for decades. Willets Point, of course, famously had paved streets with no storm drains. It would turn into a muddy mess every time it rained. Do you have access to some capital spending? How much are you targeting to those kind of infrastructure measures?
So Southeast Queens, remember, during my period as environmental chairman, one of the reasons I looked to chair that committee was to get investment. So we have $2 billion There are 55 projects ongoing as we speak. I also passed legislation, Errol, that mandates the mayor to report, in DEP and DDC to report to the council on how that money is being spent and where it's being spent, and are they keeping projects on task. Just before Ida, actually, last Monday, I actually just signed off on a $62 million project in Rosedale, which is a neighborhood that actually had no rain, no flooding, relatively, just standing water on the street this period. So we really dodged a bullet on this one for that neighborhood. But there have been hundreds of millions of dollars invested in South Queens already. Like I said, 55 projects ongoing, including on the block where we saw flooding on 183rd Street. There's a project going on as we speak. It just was that disinvestment in environmental racism, Errol, 40 years of disinvestment got us to this point.
What are the areas of your borough that keep you up at night? Where are some areas that, when there's a big rain, you think, oh my God, we don't have enough measures in place just yet?
Rosedale is the place that keeps me up at night. I was out about 6 in the morning after the storm because I went to the first places we know where we historically see flooding. We also just finished up another project there. So Brookfield Triangle, the $62 million project, is the last big project we have left for Rosedale there. So Rockaway, of course, Far Rockaway. We need the Army Corps to finish up the project that they're supposed to start to bring protections towards the bay. We need bulkhead improvements in Hamilton Beach as well. So the waterfront neighborhoods are normally the neighborhoods that get hit the hardest, but that didn't happen this time. It was neighborhoods that were more inland that we saw excessive flooding. So climate change is impacting everybody. Nobody's going to be able to dodge this bullet anymore. And that's why, as the president said today, it's code red. Enough rhetoric. Let's get some bills passed. Let's get this infrastructure bill passed, and let's get money into the city to build out everybody.
Even if we got a whole bunch of infrastructure money from Washington, the council is still trying to pass a citywide resiliency plan that the other side of City Hall, that the mayor's office has been dragging its heels on. Do you support that, at least at the borough-wide level, like kind of having some sense of what the full range of measures would cost, even if we don't have the money to pay for it right now?
I mean, of course I support that, but the time is ticking, Errol. Every day that there's not a hammer in the ground, we're going to find ourselves having a repeat of history. So I appreciate the studies, and that's something I said to DEP and DDC early on. We've been studied to death. Let's get some money going. Let's get some engineers hired up. Let's get some more units enhanced, so we can get hammers in the ground. That is the bottom line.
Okay, we're going to leave it there for now. Thank you, Borough President Donovan Richards. Best of luck to you with the continued rebuilding process.
Thank you, Errol.
All right, let's take a break now. When we come back, we're going to talk some more about the recovery efforts in New York and beyond. Stay with us.